I've just been looking at YouGov surveys, studies. The latest I can find, perhaps I need to look harder, but the latest I can find is from July 2024, so almost a year ago. But it's interesting to see the attitudes, British public attitudes to the conflict in the Near East. Um, I thought, yeah, so the studies seem to show that there is marginally more support for the Palestinians, but what's interesting is there's no major British appetite for either the Palestinians or Israelis. Sometimes I think we get the perception because of angry demonstrations and protests and counter-protests, and a lot of people opinionating online, that a lot of people have views on this. And I think it is true that it is one of the most talked about conflicts in the world, along with that between Ukraine and Russia. But it certainly gets a lot more attention than, for example, the war in Sudan or the war in Somalia or the war in Myanmar or the numerous other conflicts going on in the world. So it's a little bit surprising that the British public seem to be relatively apathetic to it. That is to say, there's no major support for either Israel or Palestinians. Um, Polls do seem to suggest that the support for Israel has dropped. I'm not surprised by that. I personally have had a change of sentiments. I mean, I always say this, I think it's important to say because in this hyper-partisan environment, it's easy to be pigeonholed as a Hamas sympathizer or a pro-Zionist or what have you. I always think it's important to put the caveats that after October the 7th, I was very sympathetic to Israel. And I will never, ever be sympathetic to Hamas or have much sympathy with any excuses made for Hamas. Why? Because Hamas don't target the Israeli military. They don't target Israeli politicians. I'm not saying that's justified either way, but they target Israeli civilians. They kidnapped Israeli civilians. Ironically, people who were in left-leaning kibbutzes who probably wouldn't have been fans of Netanyahu. Uh, that's appalling. They kill people in their own homes. They have kept people in horrendous conditions, and there are still hostages remaining. But I've also noticed a very uncomfortable attitude with pro-Israelis in the West, which is to say that there's this desensitization, there's this almost dehumanization of the Palestinians. I do think there is an attitude that they're expendable. And I'm convinced if we were talking about 50,000 dead Israelis, there would be very, very different attitudes going on. There is simply double standards when it comes to Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians. Um, and they always say, oh, well, Hamas hides among them. I take the view that even if there is one Hamas gunman or a dozen Hamas gunmen in a hospital, they themselves deny it, but I wouldn't really trust them. But regardless, even if that was the case, does that justify bombing a hospital? Does it justify killing scores of civilians? In the latest carnage, 48 more have been killed, including dozens of children. I mean, this is going on day after day after day. The pain in the mental language is going to be intense. It's going to be, it's going to cause generational hatred. And it seems Netanyahu is doing everything he can to ensure that there isn't peace in the region. It's all very well saying there won't be peace until every hostage is freed, but frankly, I don't believe that Israel would stop if every hostage was freed. I think it's become very obvious that this is a lot more for Israel. This is more than the hostages and it's more than supposed self-defense. This is about the complete annihilation of Gaza. I mean, even if you want to say that the 52,000 figure has been exaggerated, let's say it's 40,000, let's say it's 30,000, it's very, very clear that civilians are suffering profoundly. When people say that there's no starvation going on, that there's no humanitarian crisis, it's really propagandists try to claim that, and its supporters try to claim that. It's it would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. Um, Israel's lied about the killing of aid workers. Um, I frankly don't trust Israeli sources. I used to trust them more than Arab sources, but frankly, at this point, I think it's just went well beyond self-defense. I mean, Israel always says, "Oh, we give people warnings." But where the hell are they supposed to go? I just think that if you believe in certain moral standards, if you believe that certain things are wrong, such as the killing of civilians, it has to be consistent. I mean, I don't understand people who support Ukraine, and I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine, but they support Ukraine and yet they also support Israel doing what it's doing in Gaza. Or people who support the Palestinians but make excuses for what Putin's doing in Ukraine. If you're against the killing of innocent Ukrainians, you should be against the killing of innocent Palestinians. If you're against the killing of innocent Palestinians, you should be against the killing of innocent Ukrainians. I don't know how people think they can cherry pick when it comes to morality. Um, I mean, I find myself increasingly disgusted by what Israel's doing. Every single day we're seeing carnage. Every single day we're seeing entire families wiped out. Now, at this point, any notion of a ceasefire or a two-state solution seems very, very far off. And yeah, I do hold Hamas equally culpable. Um, it was Hamas's decision to attack its more powerful neighbor. It was Hamas's decision to risk the lives of Palestinians by provoking Israel. But I do hold Israel responsible for its own military actions. And this extensive bombing campaign, the bombing of hospitals, the attempts to cut off aid, it's morally repugnant. And we're also seeing violence flaring now in the West Bank. Sanctions have been put on far right settlers. Frankly, I think some of those settlers are just thugs. I know Louis Theroux's made a new documentary. I don't get a very good impression from the settlers. I think they're ultra religious nuts. I think that they are. I think they see Arabs as less than human. I think that they are. I think most of them are extremists. Shouldn't say all of them, but I think that there is definitely an attitude there that does nothing for peace in the region. Now, of course, Hamas brainwashing children to hate Jews doesn't help either. That's why I will always be anti-Hamas. Hamas is a poisonous influence. It's worth noting that whilst the Palestinian people suffer, the leaders of Hamas are living in luxury in Qatar and elsewhere. Although that would have been, um, I imagine, there have been shuffles going on in the leadership position with Israel having killed some of those leaders. But that in itself is a point. Even when Israel killed senior commanders of Hezbollah, Hamas, the bombing continues. I just think it's actually bad strategy to say, well, we're going to wipe out your entire family, but we're not against you. We're against Hamas or Hezbollah. It doesn't work like that. If someone has seen their entire family killed, naturally they're going to hate Israel. I think this country hasn't done itself any favours with continued support for Israel. Now, if the Prime Minister was to announce tomorrow all arms to Israel would be completely cut off, and I've said this before, it's a relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The vast majority of support comes from the United States, followed by Germany. So the UK contribution is quite minor. But even if Starmer were to announce that tomorrow, what would happen is you'd have a huge backlash from the pro-Israel lobby, some within the Labour Party, but especially in the Tories, probably Reform. I also think that I mentioned the pro-Israel side in the West. There's been a lot of coverage of the university protests in the United States. Now, I don't believe in stopping other students going about their studies. I don't believe in threatening violence. I definitely don't believe in praising Hamas. But it's also true that for all the Trump administration likes to talk about free speech, there isn't much free speech when it comes to criticism of Israel. It's almost like they see that as an extension of the United States. Um, it's not anti-Semitic to point out that there is a powerful pro-Israel lobby in both the United States and the UK. In this country, if you look at the coverage in the likes of the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, and to a lesser extent the Times, the bias towards Israel is astounding. They'll report on the civilian deaths, but that editorial bias there is so, so profound. I will say one thing that's developed with me. I've got more sympathy for the BBC because I think They have been condemned by both sides. Early on, I thought it was a serious mistake not to call a terrorist attack a terrorist attack. I mean, I still think that was a mistake, but BBC's been attacked for being anti-Israel. Well, that expression "don't shoot the messenger" comes to mind. Reporting on an airstrike that's killed civilians isn't being anti-Israel. In fact, yesterday a BBC cameraman narrowly missed himself being killed, and he actually was comforting some children. This is happening. This is absolutely state terrorism by Israel. It's repugnant, and I have to say, people who just blindly support Israel, one can only conclude that they see Palestinians as less worthy than Israelis. They see them as expendable. Because you can be absolutely sure if this was the other way around, it wouldn't be accepted. Um, even whether it constitutes the definition of genocide or not, at the very, very least, there's unquestionably war crimes going on. At the very least, we're seeing mass killing going on. Um, I think that I've heard this argument, oh, if Israel wanted to take out Gaza, it would do it overnight, but that's not the point. Often, if we are talking about the issue of genocide, it doesn't often happen just overnight. Most genocides are actually prolonged. Israel does have the means. It's thought to be a nuclear power. It could probably take out Gaza tomorrow, but it's not going to be so explicit about it. Rather, it's this continued bloody um, policy that it's adopting of just bombing and bombing and bombing. And I just can't imagine the suffering that's going on there for Israeli propagandists to say that there is no suffering and to claim it's all Hamas propaganda. I can allow that some of it might be Hamas propaganda, but there comes a point when independent observers on the ground see for themselves what is going on. I think it's lazy to just dismiss as that everything is Hamas propaganda. Even like I say, if Hamas is exaggerating casualty figures, it's just common sense that if you have an extensive bombing campaign in a densely populated area, you're going to have heavy civilian casualties. I just think that what's happening, the bombing of hospitals, the cutting off of aid, it's morally unsustainable. So I am absolutely against what Israel is doing. I don't think this is about self-defense. I think what we're seeing is ethnic cleansing. I think what we're seeing is an attempt to eradicate Gaza. And for Trump to propose building real estate there, it's sickening, actually. It's really not dissimilar to what Russia's doing in Mariupol, putting out propaganda that it's now worth living in. This isn't the stage Israel's at now, but um, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of years down the line or less than that, um, depending on what the situation on the ground is, there is major building projects going on there. Wealthy settlers then move into Gaza. I wouldn't at all be surprised if that happens. Literally on the bodies of dead Palestinians. And let's not forget there's graveyards there. There's ancestral homes there. But is this as simple as saying I'm pro Palestinian and anti Israel? No, because the conflict is not that black and white. I'm anti Hamas and I'm pro Israelis who just want peace in the region. I'm pro Palestinians who are anti Hamas. I'm anti Netanyahu and I'm anti far right settler violence. But I think presenting it as like black and white, like you're either, are you pro Israel or pro Hamas? Or excuse me, pro Palestinian. That's just the point. It's not that black and white. Um, I think there is anti-Semitism out there, but I also think, frankly, some Zionists and some pro-Israelis unquestionably, undeniably use that as an excuse. I was looking again at the footage of Gideon Vulture, who heads the campaign against anti-Semitism in the UK, and his exchange with a police officer last year, which went viral because the officer said, "Sir, you look visibly Jewish." Now, at the time, my reaction was that's appalling. Jewish people should be able to walk in peace. But there's more to it than that. Apparently, Mr. Fault is actually a bit of a provocateur. I mean, why go to a march with cameras if he just left the synagogue? I think there's things about that that don't fully add up. And the full video was actually 13 minutes long. It wasn't the short segment that was widely seen. Um, I think there is anti-Semitism in pro-Palestinian rallies, which is stupid because some of the most vocal critics of Israel are Jewish people. In fact, I support groups such as Jewish Voice for Peace and others that are Jewish-led groups that are against what Israel is doing. So anyone who is angry with Israel killing Palestinians, so they just want to hate all Jews, that's a stupid, boneheaded approach. Um, I even saw a late Holocaust survivor criticize Israel. So right-wing Zionists who want to think that they alone are the spokespeople for Jewish people, it's not only arrogant, it's inaccurate. Um, and they want to hide behind the anti-Semitism charges to silence debate. Really, it's no different from Islamists trying to silence debate by calling everything Islamophobic. Criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitism. Being concerned about innocent Palestinians being killed is not anti-Semitism. Praising Hamas might well be, given Hamas's genocidal charter. Um, but this is a very, very grim situation, sorely depressing, and I just if you have the attitude that Israel should have a green light to do as it pleases, then don't tell me you believe in human rights or human decency. It's appalling. The late Pope Francis, to his credit, was very strong on this issue. He called that church in Gaza regularly. I hope his successor, I hope Leo the 14th will follow suit. But explicitly, Francis also condemned anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is vile. I think it's a horrible way of thinking. But conflating actual anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of Israel is cynical, dishonest, and manipulative, and it has to be called out. I mean, how long is this going to go on? It's a horrible, horrible situation. Every single day, civilians being killed. It's horrible.